Mr. Charles Montgomery Burns is one of the oldest characters in the history of The Simpsons, appearing throughout its 35 seasons, and his age is one of the most used jokes. In some of the early episodes it is mentioned that Burns is about 81 years old, but as the series progresses it is mentioned that he is so old that he has suffered from every disease there is, even mentioning that he was born when the supercontinent of Pangaea still existed, which was hundreds of millions of years ago. So, is Burns a superior being in The Simpsons? Is he a deity who came to build civilization as we know it, or is he the Antichrist? Well, the latter would explain many things, but we will solve all these doubts on our way to discover what is the true age of Mr. Burns and how he has managed to live so long. You'd think the answer to today's mystery of the day would be pretty simple. It's a cartoon, kid, don't be effing around. A phrase that has become popular in some viral internet lulyeahteam memes. But what would become of us if we took this phrase seriously? In the first seasons, it was already common to find some contradictions regarding Mr. Burns' age. For example, in Season 2, we see how in Simpson and Delilah, Mr. Burns mentions to Homer that he is 81 years old while showing him some pictures of his college years, although Homer thinks he is 102. This is only the second episode of the season, but by episode 18 of the season, Marge mentions that Mr. Burns is 104. This is consistent with information from other episodes such as in Who Shot Mr. Burns? From Season 6, where Principal Skinner tells Burns that it was very naive of him to believe that he could pass himself off as an elementary school student with 104 years on him. At this age is repeated in the Season 7 episode Homer the Smithers. After punching Burns, a frightened Homer runs out of his boss's office and mentions killing a 104-year-old man. And if that wasn't enough, there's also the episode A Hunka Hunka Burns in Love, where Mr. Burns' date again mentions that this character's age is 104, so this age is one of the most consistent throughout the show, and we'd do well to keep it in mind. However, as the series progresses, Mr. Burns' age becomes a running joke among the characters, and Burns even joins the joking train along with Smithers, and they get to make comments about how old he really is. As in the Regina monologues, where upon approaching an ATM to withdraw money, Burns asks Smithers for the password to his account, to which Smithers replies that he should just enter his age and proceeds to type in 4 digits. On another occasion, when the billionaire fires all of his employees from the plant and only keeps Homer, he confesses to him that his age is 4 digits. Although it is worth mentioning that these comments already come from Season 15, which is when these jokes start to become more recurrent and Burns' age is no longer taken so seriously. But undoubtedly the most smokiest joke regarding this topic comes from the episode The Seemingly Never-Ending Story, where Lisa sees a ram that shortly after tries to attack her, so she runs to ask for help from Burns. They both end up escaping the beast in a panic room, the password for which is Burns' birthplace, and he proceeds to write Pangaea, the supercontinent that broke apart 175 million years ago, which would make Burns the first human on the face of the earth and someone who has gone through all the evolutionary changes, basically turning into a sort of Adam. But how seriously should we take this bullshit? Clearly there are more examples we could mention where Burns' age is modified, but that's enough to raise today's mystery. Without a doubt, one of the most direct routes we can take to find answers is to rely not so much on the testimonies of Mr. Burns himself and the people around him, but on his history, his childhood, his family tree, and any solid evidence we can find. We know, thanks to some episodes like Rosebud, that Burns' birthday is on September 15th. However, in that same episode we can see a bit of his childhood, revealing to us that when he was very small, he had a humble stage living with his parents and had his stuffed teddy bear Bobo. One day, a man arrives in an antique limousine and offers his parents to take the child. The parents leave that choice to little Burns, but since the gentleman is a millionaire, Burns decides to abandon his poor life and go with him. Initially, we are not given many details about the context of this scene, such as who is the guy who takes Burns, or why is he living in a humble house when in other episodes he is seen leading a better life in his childhood. And well, it turns out that the most likely identity of this gentleman is actually his grandfather, Wainwright Burns. Nor is the grandfather's age exactly known, only that he was probably born at some early point in the 19th century, and that in the middle of this century he had his son Clifford Burns, father of Charles Burns. Sadly, Mr. Burns' childhood is also replete with contradictions, as in several flashbacks we see him as a child on certain dates, and in others we see him as an adult during the same years. For example, there are several episodes where he is seen as an adult in the early 20th century, On one occasion, it is mentioned that Burns was one of the survivors of the Titanic, which sank in 1912. But in other episodes such as Bobby, It's Cold Outside, has a flashback to Christmas of 1935, where he is seen as a child still. During this flashback, his parents are seen again, but this time they behave cold and distant with him, unlike in the episode Rosebud, where we saw his parents happy and even called him Happy. In this new glimpse into the character's past, we learn that his parents were distant between them and that they treated their son Charles with much indifference. So in 1935, he asks a Santa in a mall to please his parents give him a hug and a smile, which does not happen because just on Christmas Day they take him to a boarding school, and according to Burns' testimony, when he returns to see them, they were already dead. So Mr. Burns' childhood looks quite difficult, and we could now understand why he is the way he is. However, in another rather old episode, we can see that in fact Mr. Burns' mother, Daphne Burns, is still alive. In the episode Homer the Smithers can be seen in a clip where Smithers calls his boss his mother, who he claims is 122 years old. Upon answering, she says that her son is an inconsiderate fool who is always busy with business and never calls her, so she plans to give him his comeuppance until he begs for mercy. After that, Homer pretends to be Mrs. Daphne when they transfer the call with Burns, and terrified, he apologizes to his mother for disconnecting her from a respirator 50 years ago, as he didn't think she would live that long. These testimonies are very important because they clarify for us the true nature of the mother-son relationship, as it is not a memory but an authentic interaction in the present of the show. How Daphne talks about her son with harshness and contempt can confirm to us that Montgomery Burns surely had a very difficult childhood, thanks to his parents, who were quite strict and even aggressive with him. Of course, in other episodes, Mr. Burns assures that his parents are dead, but this seems to be a partial lie, since it is clear that his mother is still alive, although publicly he prefers to consider her dead due to the problems he has been dragging since his childhood. The episode of Homer the Smithers was released in 1996, and as we mentioned in another video, this series uses a floating timeline, so the year of publication of each season is usually the year in which the story takes place. And although the years move forward, the present of the characters remains frozen, because they do not age and remain the same age. But if we take as a reference the date of departure of the chapter and subtract the age of Mrs. Daphne, that means that she must have been born around 1874. At that time, it was very common for couples to marry and have children in their late teens or early adulthood. So we might suggest that Burns was born when Daphne was in her early 20s, which puts the probable date of Burns' birth around 1894. That assures us that his age is not 4 digits, let alone millions of years old, but a man just over 100 years old. Something that gives us more evidence is the episode Fraudcast News, where after a stone head collapses in Springfield, Montgomery Burns is believed to have died during the accident. The news anchor actually alludes to it being a person believed to have lived for thousands of years, although it is later clarified that he was referring to the stone head. A joke that represents the perception that the characters and several of the fans have regarding Burns' age. In this same fragment, Burns assures that he has been 89 years old for a long time, which can be interpreted in many ways, such as that his appearance was frozen in his 89 years thanks to the deal he made with the devil, or that he has simply been deceiving the people of Springfield about his true age for a long time and always lies saying he is 89 years old. The final clue may come in the episode The Mansion Family, where during a celebration an award is given to Cornelius Chapman, the oldest living inhabitant of Springfield, and it is specified that Chapman is 108 years old. A moment after the award is given, Chapman dies in front of everyone and they proceed to give his award to the next oldest living inhabitant of Springfield. And when they ask who is over 100 years old, only Mr. Burns remains standing. Considering that his mother seems to have had him between 1894 and 1899, and that one of Mr. Burns' most recurring ages before he became a joke was 104 years old, it appears that he could be between 104 and 107 years old. Furthermore, it is extremely clear that he is consciously lying to others about this fact, as several of his flashbacks have erroneous data at his convenience, or he may simply already be somewhat senile. For example, in the episode Rosebud, his childhood takes place in the early 20th century, yet his grandfather stops by to pick up a limousine whose model resembles those presented by the Armbruster Company years later in 1928. Or he sometimes remembers himself with hair during his early adulthood, and sometimes remembers himself bald since college. All of this may be a product of his lies, or his old age affecting his memory, as with the supposed death of his mother, when we know she is still alive even though he has tried to kill her off as he did his brothers. And it's also worth mentioning that the memories specifically from the Rosebud episode are part of a dream, so parts of it could easily have been created by his imagination. Nor can we ignore the enormous amount of trauma he had in his childhood, with parents who mistreated and psychologically assaulted him, his mother being unfaithful to his father, a perverse narcissistic grandfather who wanted to shape him in his image and likeness, and in general with a great lack of affection and understanding. This could have led him to create false memories as defense mechanisms to protect himself from the horrible reality he went through in his early years. So, while there are clearly many jokes that seem to indicate that this is an impossibly old person, such as the fact that his social security number is 2, or the time we are shown a woodcut of Burns terrorizing children in the 19th century, within the Simpsons story it is pretty consistent that he was born between 1894 and 1899. Just the scriptwriters keep this mysticism as funny, and we know they are just jokes because they have no internal consistency whatsoever, while time and time again we have seen proof that Burns is around 104 years old, give or take a few years of margin of error because of the floating timeline and one or the other pact with the devil. So, I hope you liked this video, like it if you did, subscribe for more videos like this, and see you in the next video. Bye.